We could all find our seats. Good morning. Transit and Bus Committee meeting for July is called to order. Mr. Marino, are there any members of the public who have registered and wish to speak?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. We have 18 speakers this morning. The first speaker is Dolores Orr, and Ms. Orr will be followed by David Kelso. I'd like to remind each speaker they have 2 minutes for their comments. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Dolores Orr, and I'm chairperson of Community Board 14 in Queens, which represents the peninsula of Rockaway. I'm here today to talk about the agenda item of the Q22. The staff summary states that the Q22 has been experiencing service and reliability issues. Well, that has been true since the day the MTA took over the Q22 line. That report also states that MTA shared with the Community Board 14 the plans for Q22. However, the summary fails to say that we oppose the short turn of the Q22 at Beach 116th Street. And why do we do that? Well, we know that the ridership reduces dramatically going west beyond 116th Street. We acknowledge that, and we want to commend them on being the most efficient that they can in providing service to us. However, by making the short turn at 116th Street, it's going to tremendously impact that area. It is a major commercial district, highly reliant on cars being able to park. It is also resident to a ladder and engine company of the fire department. Putting the bus on that street will impede their ability to respond in a timely fashion. NYPD Transit District is also on that street, and the Q53 also terminates there, and I have quite a few interesting pictures if anyone would like to do it. So would like to see them. Adding the Q22 to that north-south commercial strip will paralyze the traffic, will result in less residents traveling there and affecting the business on that street. Also, in rationalizing the bus stops, 3 of the 4 we oppose because it's more than 600 feet. And last, the Q35, we would like terminated at Beach 108 Street, where there's ferry access and gives more availability. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Orr. The next speaker is David Kelso, and Mr. Kelso will be followed by Omar Vera.
Thank you very much. I'm here representing a group called the Uptown Subway Advocates on Facebook. In the past year since I began the group, we've accumulated over 4,100 people on Facebook that are regularly posting and helping each other navigate the Uptown trains, specifically the A and the 1 trains. Current issues that my members are upset about is this: on the Uptown side, usually in the evenings when the trains start to stack up going uptown, we've gotten into a habit with the A train specifically of dumping the passengers at 168 or 175 to supposedly speed up the process to get them up to 207 to the terminus. In speaking to a couple of the MTA drivers of the trains, they say that that really does not help. The time that it takes for us to get off of a subway car at 175 would take just as much time to get me to my stop at 181 or 190. So we'd very much like to have that idea looked at again. Another big problem that we've had recently is whether or not the MTA, the Parks Department, or the Department of Transportation is going to take the responsibility for keeping the tunnels clean. As you know, our stops are 6, 7, and 8 stories underground, and we have tunnel accesses, but often the drains are clogged, there are dead rats, there are hypodermic needles, and everyone calls everyone. It took us 15 emails to get a rat taken out of the tunnel a couple of weeks ago. In addition, I would like to ask put one idea forward, and that is to possibly take the longest subway line that we have, the A line, and break it up somewhere in the southern end of Manhattan or the beginning of Brooklyn so that we could get regular service going.
Thank you, Mr. Kelso.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Omar Vera. Mr. Vera will be followed by Jason Pinheiro.
Good morning, MTA Board's Transit and Bus Committee. Welcome to the July edition of your meeting. We got a lot to discuss about today, but I noticed, first things first, I want to talk about regarding the M14 select bus service that you're putting temporarily. Why is it temporarily? I understand it's you're trying to get up to speed with the L train shutdown, but speaking of which, all the M14 buses should be SBS. Because I already proposed that all the crosstown buses should have that eventually, but then we'll have 3 SBS buses. Think about it: the M14A, the M14D, and finally the M14L, and it's called L because it's going to be named after the L train. See that can go through. Also, I'm happy that you're installing B82 SBS. Desperately needed for the community in Brooklyn. I used to commute on the B41 bus. I'm going to Kings Plaza before I switched jobs earlier this year. But like I said, after the B82, the B41 should get SBS, and there should be 2 B41 SBS routes. The other one that goes to Bergen Beach, not the Kings Plaza one, should be the B41A, while the B41 will remain the Kings Plaza bus. But both should be SBS, limited. And I wish the BX41 could be extended to LaGuardia Airport, because that's also desperately needed. Like, that was proposed several years ago, but unfortunately, it didn't come through as of this year. But time for the direct Bronx-Queens connection is what we also need. Oh, and last but not least, before you enjoy the August recess, I will propose renaming the 14th Street 8th Avenue stop to 14th Street Google in honor of the Google office there in the city. I believe they will really appreciate it. We should just discuss it a bit. But in any case, have a good day.
Thank you, Mr. Vera. The next speaker is Jason Pinheiro. He'll be followed by Murray Bowden.
Good morning, Transit Committee. Good morning, Andy. Good morning, Freddie, Andrew, and the rest of the board members. A couple of things that I want to mention. One, I've been seeing an increase on fare evasion, especially in my home station, that is Atlantic Avenue Barclays Center. I hope that Chief De La Torre is listening to this, because I've been sending out tweets like constantly and I don't get answers. Second, I want the MTA, I want New York City subway. I already discussed this with Andy Byford about the increase of trains having their brakes automatically activated. This is occurring multiple times per day. And the most recent one was early this morning. And last but not least, we want more elevators and more subway stations. And I hope that by the end of the year, about half of our subway system is ADA accessible. That's all I have to say for this month.
Thank you, Mr. Pinheiro. The next speaker is Murray Bowden, and Mr. Bowden will be followed by Pedro Valdez Rivera.
I was going to speak about handicap access this morning, but situation arose in the last few minutes where I realized that what we say has an impact beyond what we think. Other people misinterpret what one says, and when we think they understand us, they come away with a different meaning of it. Happened to me just now. I have to speak about it, because what we say has meaning. We may have it positive, and it may be misinterpreted. I've said a number of things about a number of issues here over the years, Now I realize some of them have been misinterpreted. We need to learn to listen and go beyond just the words and see if the people are saying things that are understood differently than in our culture. Things have been happening for years, and I've asked that certain changes, and they didn't come about. But right now, I can see that there is many people moving forward to correct issues that go back many years. And it will take time to go forward. So I've been guilty of making mistakes and being misinterpreted and misinterpreting what other people have said. But people are listening in new ways. They're listening in ways that have never been done before in my lifetime, in the lifetime of our country. We're in a different environment. Listen carefully and listen past the actual words and see if you can understand what the people mean and where they're coming from. I want to thank you all for the opportunity of having spoken here for all these years. My time is up. It's now my grandchildren's generation to take over. Thank you all for listening to me.
Thank you, Mr. Bowden. The next speaker is Pedro Valdez Rivera, and Mr. Rivera will be followed by Liz Patrick.
Good morning. Today I will talk about the agenda of the B82 Select Bus Service to vote on for today's Transit Committee meeting and also possibly on this Wednesday's board meeting. I tend to support the B82 Select Bus Service, and here's why. The B82 bus is one of the most unreliable bus routes in the borough of Brooklyn, which I born and raised at. It's also one of the most slowest because of the congestion going on Kings Highway. And as a result, and there are 30,000 people using the B82 bus every single day. I witnessed it firsthand when I do petitions for a transit advocacy group. I see bus bunchy on B82, 2, 3, maybe 4 on one stop, which is, for example, the Keys Highway B&Q subway station. Most of them are either limits, most of them are locals, and the like. There are a lot of limits, and there's a local bus. I understand that people are frustrated because they lost some parking spaces, or the economy of the small business go down around where the car you drive around the B82, but times have been changing. It's time for a compromise that the MTA and the DOT and the small business community and the homeowners and the strike hangers need to come to a compromise to make sure the B82 Select Bus Service run as efficient, quick, and as disciplined as possible. My proposal to make the B82 Select Bus Service convenient is to consider put articulate buses on the B82 Select Bus Service implemented in the fall. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera. The next speaker is Liz Patrick. Ms. Patrick will be followed by Jean Ryan.
Hi, I'm Liz Patrick from the East 72nd Street Neighborhood Association. Last July, service cuts to our 3 crosstown buses, the M31, 66, and 72, were announced and put into effect beginning September 2017. Our community argued against the assertion that there was insufficient demand, and we cited many instances of overcrowding due to large volumes of hospital employees commuting to their jobs on York Avenue. 2 weeks ago, representatives from New York City Transit provided an update of the crosstown bus ridership at our Community Board 8 Transportation Committee meeting. They cited a May 2018 survey that concluded that the M66 was indeed overcrowded, while the M31 and M72 were still within current loading guidelines. When asked by the audience when the service level would be adjusted to address the M66 overcrowding, we were told not until the first weekend in April 2019. You can imagine the negative reaction from residents. After much discussion, we were all left with the impression that the ridership survey process and related adjustments to bus service schedules are inefficient and operate with an unacceptably long lag time. Residents asked if existing MetroCard technology could be better utilized to gather and analyze ridership data on a more timely basis, or whether the MTA's Fast Forward modernization plan would address this critical issue. At a time when the MTA is looking to reverse declines in bus ridership and our residents are eager to climb on board, let's not keep passengers waiting for 9 months to get the service levels they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Patrick. The next speaker is Jean Ryan, and Ms. Ryan will be followed by William Henderson.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Jean Ryan from Disabled in Action and Taxis for All campaign. I have 4 issues today. They're quick. Express bus trips, new pilot bus, accessoride, long rides, and children in wheelchair strollers. I took 6 express bus trips in the last month. Only 2 had no problems. So that's not a good rate. One was blocked by a tour bus for over 20 minutes, so I had to go in the street. The lift went up very slowly. The driver didn't know how to use the lift. He actually said, "I don't know what to do." And the last one was the new low floor pilot bus. I went on it. I loved getting in. It was so easy to get in. But I rode in the primary seat, and it was easy to get in there, but I got vertigo from riding backwards on the bus. So I'm going to have a hard time sitting in that seat. And the other one, it's hard to get the securements because they're in back. So if we go in and the driver doesn't get the securements out first, then he can't reach the securements to put us in place. So maybe that could be looked at again. I have a suggestion for accessoride, not when they take us to other boroughs, when we have a 20-mile trip, not to be diverting into another borough to pick up somebody or drop off somebody, because it just adds an hour or more to our trip and it doesn't really make sense. And I've heard from 2 parents with children in adaptive wheelchairs. They look just adaptive wheelchair strollers. They look kind of like a regular stroller, but the kid might be older, might not. And some bus drivers do not want to let them on the bus with their child in the stroller. They tell them they have to fold it up. But if you have a child who can't walk and you can't carry them, and they're disabled and they can't hold on to you or anything, then something has to be done. So I'd like you to look into how we could solve that problem. I'm sure training is something that we could do about it. And maybe, I don't know, deal with the parents directly too. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ryan. The next speaker is William Henderson. Mr. Henderson will be followed by Janice Forbes.
In view of our wealth of commentators today, I'll be brief. I'm here to urge you to support the establishment of select bus service along the B82 route. Following many opportunities for the community to learn and comment on the proposal, there's been spirited debate within the community, but the plan presented here today represents a solution that responds to the expressed concerns of the community while overall providing for more efficient bus movement in the corridor. Select bus service is a workable concept that demonstrably addresses the need to increase bus speeds, arrest and even reverse erosion in ridership, increase rider satisfaction, and improve the vitality of commercial areas that it serves. Our preference is that SBS service operate in bus lanes as much as possible, as this increases its efficiency. We believe, however, that the approach outlined in the proposal presented to you today makes beneficial, although limited, use of bus lanes, takes advantage of additional traffic management techniques, and should be implemented promptly to address inefficient and unreliable bus service that B82 riders face. We ask that the members of this committee also lend their support to this plan for B82 select bus service. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson. The next speaker is Janice Forbes, who will be followed by Vermita Worrell.
Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Hi, yes, Janice Forbes. I'm here on behalf of Wheeling Forward, organization that advocates for persons with disabilities, and just really to be positive about the new program through Accessoride, the CURB program, the pilot program. I've been a part of Accessoride for many years, and just recently you introduced the CURB program, CURB taxi program, and it's been incredibly beneficial. And I wanted to just thank you for that one. I have been using it for several months now, and it has been life-changing where I'm able to, where Accessoride I have to call a day before or 2 days before to get to appointments, medical appointments, physical therapy, all kinds of appointments. And the CURB program has allowed me to call within a matter of minutes and be able to get to my appointments safely and get there quickly. And it's just been that beneficial, life-changing. I've had an opportunity to travel to different boroughs in order to, I'm able to do physical therapy in the Bronx where I wouldn't have been able to with Accessoride, only because I have to be there at a specific time, like on time. Accessoride is notorious for not necessarily getting you on time. So I want to say the CURB program has afforded me that benefit, and also to do my physical therapy in Brooklyn. So I wanted to promote that and say it's a good thing. And if you could continue that program, I'm not sure, because it is a pilot program, I'm not sure what pros and cons you have in mind, but just know that it's very beneficial to us in wheelchairs who need to get around our communities efficiently and safely. Okay.
Thank you for your comments. The next speaker is Vermita Worrell, and she will be followed by Tricia Harris.
Yes. Good morning. I'm here to talk about the pilot program and how much it does for me, and how blessed I am to have the pilot program. I'll start with saying that 4 years ago to yesterday, my father passed away. I took the Accessoride to get to the train station, the Long Island Railroad, and because they stopped everywhere else before they would take me where I needed to go, which was just the Long Island Railroad, I missed my father's funeral for that reason. Anyway, and the pilot program helps me get to where I have to go on time. I can't do this with Accessoride also because if I depend on somebody to help me in the morning, let's say I have a morning appointment, I depend on somebody to help me in the morning time, and I'm running late. If I'm not downstairs on time with Accessoride, I'll be left, and I won't be able to make that appointment. But if I have the pilot program, all I have to do is call whenever I'm ready. I can call. Also, the last time I took the Accessoride, I made an appointment to come and go, and my appointment ended like an hour earlier, and I had to just sit there for 2 hours because, of course, I had to wait the hour that I was supposed to be picked up, plus the hour that they were late picking me up. You know, so I really appreciate the CURB program. The drivers are very nice. The riding is very comfortable, and I hope that we can continue with the curb program. I hope we can do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Worrell. The next speaker is Tricia Harris.
Hello, my name is Miss Teresa Harris. I started off on the curb program as a participant, as trying it out, almost a year now, and I do not want this ever to go away. I really don't. I really appreciate the program. I'm getting where I'm getting to go, on time, in time. I'm getting where I want to go, which places I would never believe I would get to go. I'm getting there. This program is really, really, really needed. I know it's going to cost a lot of money to get more cars or fleets or what you call it, but please don't take this program away. Please, it's really needed. Accessoride, I'm blessed to have it. I've been on it for over 10 years, but it's a problem, a really desperate problem. You're either 3 hours late, 3 hours early, never show, and that's really frustrating. I like when I can call 5 minutes, I can get where I'm going on time, I can call another 10 minutes, get to another appointment on time. It's really, really helpful. Please, the curve is a good thing. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harris. The next speaker is Jessica De La Rosa, who will be followed by Nina Bocchianis.
Hi, good morning. So I love the Curb app, just as everybody else says. I can't tell you the amount of flexibility I have. I took Curb here, and it was no problem. Traveling in a wheelchair in the rain is a challenge. So having to take the bus or something like that, or the subways, which we know elevators don't work, I was able to not get wet, get here safely. My chair didn't break down. All these other issues that, you know, come from having to take other forms of transportation. So please, I know it's going to be a challenge. Everything comes with a challenge. I have a disability. Every day is a challenge for me. I get challenges, believe me. But to take it away would just really not be good. I do dance, wheelchair dance. My dance teacher, she texted me this morning. She's like, hey, we have a rehearsal tonight. Can you make it? And I'm like, yeah, because I have the Curb app. I'm not deterred by the rain. I'm thinking I have to take the train or the bus. No, I can do spontaneous things. Yes, it helps with doctor's appointments and things of that nature too. But my social life, it helps people with their social life. If my friend calls me tonight and I'm like, yeah, I'm going, I'm there. And there's no deterrence. And a lot of people with disabilities tend to be stuck at home. Nobody wants to deal with the headache of Accessoride. And I've been on Accessoride since I was a kid. So we're talking maybe, I don't know, 17 years now. So, yeah, Curb is great. The drivers are nice. I haven't had much of an issue, maybe one, to be perfectly honest. But overall, it is great. Yeah. And they don't give my dog a problem, so I'm good with that too. But yes, thank you. I appreciate you. And yes, challenges. I know. But we can find a solution, especially if you talk to the resources here too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Nina Bocchianis, followed by Sharifa Abu Hamda.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nina. So I have been using Accessoride for the past 5 years, ever since I moved out of my parents' house and kind of needed to learn how to navigate the city on my own. And I'm currently not a part of the pilot program, but I'm on the waiting list. And I've heard really great things, as I'm sure you have too, about the program. And when I was asked to come speak about it, I really sat down and thought about what the implications of that would be for my life. And, you know, we live in a world now where people with disabilities are able to go out into the world and have fulfilling lives and careers just like everyone else. And the program like this is a game changer because it is essentially contingent upon whether or not we can get there. I know for myself, I'm studying to be a psychologist. I'm getting my PhD in clinical psychology and thinking about my day, how everything is planned minute to minute. I have to go see patients. I have a full course load. I have to go to internships and externships and meetings and conferences and do research. And I'm not always going to have the time to sit in for the 30-minute pickup window to drop 3 people off in the city and then go back to Brooklyn. You know, thinking about how much freedom and autonomy and how many opportunities that the ability to just get up one morning and leave your house for your job, for your career. I think I speak for all of us when I say that we are out in the community with jobs and things to do and places to go. I mean, if I get a call in the morning that patient X had an emergency and I have to get to a psychiatric unit, am I going to be able to get there? That's the question. And I think that, you know, I hope that everyone sitting and listening, you understand how big this is, how much bigger than us. And the MTA, the idea of you guys being the forefront of the disability rights movement is empowering. And I hope that you feel that way as well. So thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. We want to be a part of the conversation and help you guys make the program the best it can be for us and the city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Sharifa Abu Hamda, followed by Tanya Capers.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. I'm here also to speak about the CURB pilot program. I became a participant since March, I believe, and it's been great, but there is a little issue. I live in Brooklyn, actually in the Gerritsen Beach area, and it's very hard to get a CURB cab in that area, where I have to actually take the city bus to a nearby station where I can get it. And for example, that happened last week where I had to take it to Kings Highway and get a CURB to go to work from that day because Accessory that morning actually left me. So I'm hoping the CURB will continue, but I would hope there would be more accessible vehicles in the neighborhoods that don't actually have as many. And that's really my comment for this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. The next speaker is Tanya Capers, who will be followed by Hilda Kaba.
Hi, I'm just here to talk about the positives of the CURB pilot. It just gives you independence. Like they said, like you could call that day, that second, and you know you're guaranteed a ride. Whereas Accessoride, you have to do it the day before. Sometimes you don't know what you have to do the next day. So that's basically what I have to say about the CURB.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Hilda Cava. I'm here to talk about CURB app. I think this is a wonderful program because you can call them the same day and you don't have to wait for like an hour. They just right away you make the reservation. Like if you want to be at 9:30 in a place and you call them to come at 8:30 their own time. But the only thing about is like here in Manhattan the service is great. I live in the Bronx and sometimes it's hard for me to get an accessible taxi. Overall I think this is a great program and I want to congratulate the people who made it because it makes the life easier for us for the disabled community. Thank you.
The next speaker is Kevin Zeng.
Hello, good morning to Friend of Rare and Andy Byford. My name is Kevin Zhang. I would like to request to B82 select bus service on weekends and extend to Coney Island Stillwell Avenue Station because I can't transfer to the B82 local bus to Coney Island Stillwell Avenue Station at Quapsy Avenue and Bay 38th Street due to the cold weather. B82 local bus will continue to terminate at Quapsy Avenue and Bay 38th Street on weekdays and weekends. B82 local bus will be terminated at Coney Island Stillwell Avenue Station overnight. B82 select bus service will be added on weekends and extend to Coney Island Stillwell Avenue Station on weekdays and weekends. Also, Fast Forward Plan Initiative have the B65 bus will now increasing service on October 2018. But why is middays, PM peak, and evening service on weekdays? And it said 15 minutes. And B65 bus needs to be 10 minutes instead of 15 minutes on weekdays. And Fast Forward Plan Initiative needs to be increased. The B11 and B16 bus, because I'm waiting for the B11 and B16 bus, is taking too long due to the cold weather, and including bring back the B20 bus along 16th Avenue and Cataria Road and extend along Bethany Road, Brooklyn Avenue, and Linden Boulevard. And the BX6 local bus have a great news for articulated bus on January 2019. And the XN60 bus will be increasing order up to 300 buses because the BX6 local bus will getting articulated bus. Thank you and have a nice day.
Thank you, Mr. Zhang. Mr. Chairman, that was the last speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marino, and thank you all for sharing your comments. The minutes of the June meeting are in the committee book. May I have a motion to approve? Is there a second? Are there any changes, comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? The minutes are approved. Mr. Mulligan, are there any changes to the work plan? Thank you. In that case, I'm happy to ask President Andy Byford to make his report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. Thank you first up to the speakers. It's always insightful to hear what you have to say, and we will certainly reflect upon what you've said. The good news is a lot of what you've told us this morning are things that we are, in fact, working on in the Fast Forward plan, so that there's a synergy there. I'd like to do a welcome, first of all, to his first meeting, second to my right, or your left as you look. This is Alex Elagudin, who is our Accessibility Chief, the Senior Advisor, reporting to me on accessibility. Welcome, Alex. It's good to have you up here at the top table with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that.
I just wanted to comment, Mr. Chairman, not on really the items in the book. Everyone can read. You can see what's written there. But I just wanted to talk about, really to me, what is crystal clear to me now, having been here 6 months, and that is that there's basically two primary things which require my focus. So the first one, in the short to medium term, to continue to deliver immediate, tangible improvements for customers across all of our modes, bus, subway, and Access-a-Ride, and across every aspect of our service. So to that end, a number of things that we've already been doing or that we're working on now. And the first thing, and really the three people to my immediate right are examples of this, is to get the right people in the right structure with the right mandate to do the right things. And so you've got Sarah as the Chief Customer Officer, a new role. Alex as the Chief on Accessibility, a new role, and Sally new to her role as SVP Subways. And there's only a handful of appointments left. So this is like putting a jigsaw together, making sure that we have the right people in that right structure. So that's very much still a work in progress, but nearly done. Secondly, we've got a much better understanding now of the root causes of delays. And you've heard me previously at one of these meetings talk about a three-phase approach to how we're tackling the issue of subway performance. And that is, first of all, you've got to have the right database to capture the delays in the first place. You have to properly attribute them or categorize them, and then you've got to take action to tackle them. So again, well, I think we're making good progress. We have that single database that we described to you at the last meeting. And we're now undertaking data-led action planning, which is resulting in a comprehensive action plan, which was actually reported in one of the dailies this morning. And with a plan that we are aiming to cut 10,000 delay incidents per month by the end of the year. Now, that is a huge challenge, but in order to do that, you needed to properly understand what are the driving forces behind those delays. And it's fairly basic stuff. To me, it is about ensuring that trains depart termini on time, that you optimize your run times between stations, and that you minimize dwell times, in other words, the times that trains are actually sitting in platforms. But there's a lot more to it than that. We've put together a comprehensive plan, and I have asked Sally, the SVP of Subways, with Frank, the Chief Operating Officer, to put together a multidisciplinary task force to include representatives, frontline staff representatives, to pilot all the initiatives that we have identified on one or more lines for a limited period, a control period, so that we can see, do they indeed have the desired effect? Because if they do, we will be rolling them out throughout the whole system. And then pushing on, still with the first objective, which is about making the system today better, pushing on with the Subway Action Plan, which has arrested the previously precipitous decline in subway performance, and the benefits of which are now bearing fruit. So although I will be reporting to you in more detail in September, just some headlines of that bearing fruit. The response time to incidents has improved by 19%. 19%. When the crews get to the incidents, they're clearing the incidents more quickly, a 28% improvement in response time, in clearance times once they get there. An improved fleet, mean distance between failures, in other words, trains more reliable. Major incidents down 11.1% since the start of the Subway Action Plan. Improved elevator availability and improved wrench time. In other words, the time that the crews can actually work on the system at night and during weekends. An improved wrench time by 40%. And this month, a big improvement in on-time performance, on-time running, punctuality, an increase from 61 to 68%. So we're definitely making progress. In parallel, obviously the main job is to make the service run more reliably, both on the subway and the buses, but we should and we can, in parallel, relentlessly improve other aspects of our service, including, as I've said, bus and Access-a-Ride. And to that end, Sarah, the Chief Customer Officer, will launch the first ever New York City Transit customer commitment later this week, which is a suite of quarterly, time-based, tangible improvements, value adds, if you like, to our customers. So more on that later this week. So that seems to me as part one of the job, to absolutely relentlessly continue to focus on the all-out basics. And I think after 6 months, we have the relevant and the requisite pieces of that jigsaw in hand. The second part is the longer-term task, and that is to deliver fast forward. Only by fundamentally modernizing the system will we be able to truly transform it. The Subway Action Plan can only do so much. We still have, it's still out there, Cold War signaling and 1960s subway cars, and they're still here and they have to go. I understand it won't be easy to get the billions to deliver fast forward. We have to make a compelling case, and we have to prove ourselves worthy custodians of the massive investment that will be required. So in addition to that first task, namely to drive the organization as is forward right now, to focus on the right things, to employ the right people, and to deliver tangible improvement now, I am finalizing over the next week, certainly 2 weeks, I'm finalizing a stakeholder strategy that we will use to persuade all levels of government, advocacy groups, union partners, and our riders that fast forward is what is needed to truly transform transit in this city and to give New Yorkers the service they deserve. So, Mr. Chairman, I look forward to sharing that stakeholder strategy with this committee and the board, and I look forward to embarking upon what will be a one-year-long roadshow to persuade people of its benefits during the fall. Thank you.
I presume Mr. Weisbrot has a question.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I really want to thank you, Mr. Byford, and your entire staff for the increased clarity on delays, which is, I think, very helpful. And obviously don't know how to solve delays unless we know what they are. But one, I see that the bulk of about a third of all delays now are in the broad category of operating environment. Could you just tell us what's included in operating environment?
I'll ask Sally, the SVP for Subways, to answer that point, please.
Thank you. Hi, Sally.
So the operating environment delays, and you're correct, I think there were about 40% of the weekday delays in June. They account for the delays that we absorb as a system that aren't tied to a single incident. So if we have a track issue or a signal issue, we're going to take those delayed trains and match them up with their parent incident. But what we still find is that even under normal operating conditions, we are absorbing delays at terminals, and those delays currently are being categorized as operating environment delays. We do think that there are root causes within that category, and we're working, now that we have the information all in the one system, we're working to see what sort of patterns there might be in that category that would help us, perhaps in some cases, take out some of those delays and attach them to a parent incident that perhaps we didn't catch in terms of a ripple impact, or perhaps tie them to a different underlying factor which we haven't yet isolated and addressed. One of the things that Andy spoke about and was covered in some news reports this weekend is the impact that we think some of the train operator behavior around some of the signal timers has created with respect to the running times in the system. That is one thing in terms of our initiatives for service management that we're very focused on right now, not removing any of that signal protection, but ensuring that our crews are supported and understand exactly how they can behave with those signals, and that we're giving our crews the best tools possible to move through the system as quickly as possible. Certainly, as we continue to make strides in understanding the root causes of those operating environment delays, we will be adding detail to your delay reporting, so you'll see more detail come from that. Ideally, we want that number, that 40% number, to come down. And then more importantly, as Andy mentioned, we want to put specific strategies in place that target those drivers of delays and ultimately improve the experience our customers are having in the system.
And if I might just add to
Thank
that,
you.
sorry, Commissioner, can I just add just one point to that? And that's what's behind the task force that I just alluded to, that the Subway Action Plan has rightly addressed specific things like clearing out drains, installation of continuously welded rail, tackling door delays by increasing the amount of work we do on subway cars, to name just a few. But what I felt was missing was, because otherwise, if you don't take specific action on just the general operating environment, there is this amorphous mass left within the delay categories that we've talked about many times at this meeting. That to me is what now finalizes the all-out assault on subway performance, and that's why we're setting up this task force.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I have a broader question, and I don't know if this is the right place to raise it, but it's both a subway and a bus question. We've seen now the
Forgive
trend.
me, Mr. Weisbrod, do you want to wait until those respective reports are made before you?
Well, I think that they're the same.
Oh, go ahead.
The trend of both subway and bus ridership declining now over a period of a couple of years. And I have two questions regarding that generally. Just one is, what do we anticipate that trend will continue, and as we plan for the next year? And two, have we been able to isolate where we're seeing the biggest declines in subway and bus ridership, and what that means for operations planning going forward? And I'm not asking particularly for a detailed answer now, but are you taking that into your
So, Commissioner, absolutely. And if you just bear with us, once we're done with a couple of the reports, Tim is going to take us through, as previously promised, a comprehensive ridership analysis. So if you wouldn't mind just holding your question. Thank you.
I think, Ms. Librera, the coast is clear. You can make your report.
Good morning. So in June, subways continued a positive trend of improvements in additional platform time and additional train time, our new journey time statistics that are customer focused. June is the 5th consecutive month of improvements in each of these statistics. These metrics were introduced to better represent the experience our customers are having in the system, and they were introduced and they are calculated by looking at the average time a customer spends waiting on a platform and comparing that to what the schedule prescribes. That's what additional platform time is, and looking at the average time a customer spends on an average trip on board a train and comparing that to what's prescribed by the schedule. That's additional train time. What we see in June of 2018 is that additional platform time is 1 minute and 11 seconds, meaning that the average customer on the average trip is spending 71 seconds longer on the platform waiting for a train than our schedule prescribes. And in terms of additional train time, again, it's about 1 minute and 10 seconds. So that's about 70 seconds additional per train trip. That's above what's called for in terms of our schedule. One of the reasons, or one of the drivers behind the improvement that we see in additional train time and additional platform time is that in June we saw a reduction in major incidents. We had 62 major incidents on weekdays in June, which is an improvement over recent months, and it's also an improvement over where we were last year in June. Specifically, there were 9 major track incidents and 18 major signal incidents in June. And each of those numbers is the lowest level that we've seen so far in 2018. Overall, when we look at the post-SAP period compared to the pre-SAP period, we see that both track and signal incidents, major incidents, are down around 12%. There was, however, an increase in major incidents in June for incidents that involved police response or medical response. And the majority of these incidents involved unauthorized persons on the right-of-way. These are very disruptive incidents, and we work to clear them as quickly as we possibly can. And we are closely coordinating and partnering with our fire department partners and our police department partners to ensure that we're handling each and every one of these incidents as quickly and efficiently as we can. Overall, response times to major incidents have improved. And in June, one indicator of that is the fact that the average number of trains per major incident was 97 trains. If you compare that to June of last year, the average number of trains per major incident was 122 trains. This report this month does include the newly revised delay chart that we walked through last month. As Andy mentioned earlier, a big component of Fast Forward is making sure that we understand the root causes of delays. We have introduced new procedures for delay attribution and quality assurance in our Rail Control Center. And this remains a work in progress. As I mentioned before, as we learn more over the coming months, we will add detail to those reports. We remain very focused on the operating environment section of the report, which, as I mentioned earlier, is about 40% of our delays in June. We need to understand the specific drivers of that 40% of delays so that we can implement specific actions that will yield customer improvements. Since we've experienced days of extreme heat so far this summer, I wanted to spend just a couple of minutes talking about our efforts to keep our fleet cool during the summer. We conduct internal surveys of our entire fleet, and we do in service, or close to our entire fleet in service, each week. And we see is that more than 98% of the cars that we're surveying are cooling at appropriate levels. Nonetheless, we know that even one hot car out in the system is something that can be a significant inconvenience to customers, and we're working to drive that number down as low as we can. We are using the data from those surveys, as well as data that we're getting from our enhanced daily inspection of HVAC equipment, and the great feedback that we've been receiving from customers through social media channels and through our new website to pinpoint specific car classes, specific components, and specific cars themselves that are having reliability problems. With that information, we've been able to design and enhance our troubleshooting techniques and inspection techniques, and we've also added new preventative maintenance measures in place. With Fast Forward, as we replace our aging fleets with newer, more modern fleets, we will be replacing our more problematic HVAC equipment in the legacy fleets with newer, modern, more reliable cooling systems. This concludes my report.
Thank you. Mr. Albert has a question, and then Mr. Greenberg. And Mr. Merdler.
Under subway car delays, of which there was a total of 163, braking, propulsion, doors, do you have that broken down by car class? Are there certain car classes that remain problematic, like the R32s, obviously? But
yes, we do have that detail by car class. The better information is the MDBF, because you can get a sense as to how that relates to the number of revenue miles that those cars are traveling. But yes, we do have that detail on a fleet basis.
And the significant, you've actually alluded to it in the detail under it, but the R188, which is a relatively new car, just is having breaking in problems apparently.
It had a very high MDBF by comparison. And so what's happened is it's really just normalizing in terms of a level of MDBF. It's still a very high performing fleet. It's just that it's typical that as we release new cars into the system, their initial MDBF is very high. As they normalize to a typical high performing fleet, we see a % reduction.
Are they solely running on the 7 line?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Greenberg, then Mr. Merdler.
At the risk of being parochial, about the 7 line, I noticed it's the laggard, actually, other than the J and the Z. How are we with the CBTC implementation, CBTC on the 7 line? Where is that now?
So we are proceeding, and we've made some significant progress. We aren't on the initial timeline that we had hoped to be on, but we are working toward an end-of-year date for full cutover. In fact, we expect that to happen late fall. We have had some success, or have had a good amount of success with the recent cutovers that we have had. We are continuing to work with the legacy system that's in place, which is not obviously as reliable as we would like it to be. But the progress along the CBTC cutover is moving well.
Okay. One other question about CBTC. I just wanted to note in the MDBF, it did note that because some modifications were made to the R143s and the L lines, the MDBF on those cars, the 143s, has improved. I assume that what was learned, the problems with that implementation, that CBT is moved forward, and we won't see those kind of problems. I just think that if people think CBTC is a panacea, I mean, it's not that, and one that implementation is not difficult. For us, it has been. I mean, both on the L line and the 7 line, we've seen delays, we've seen challenges with the equipment. I just hope those things will learn in the future, because one of the these projects are in some ways very much delayed, I think, because of the fear at the agency over the years about technology, new technology, and how it may impact a system that requires very high reliability. I don't necessarily fault, as other people may have, that we've been slow in doing this, because I think that the fear has been borne out here. I just hope moving forward in the new projects that we don't see the same type of delays and also problems and impacts on service. And just a comment that when we move forward,
we're absolutely incorporating lessons learned as we go, and our Success and Fast Forward requires that we move quickly and efficiently through the implementation, which means that we absolutely must incorporate all those lessons.
Mr. Merdler.
As Mr. Byford pointed out at the outset, the underlying data is a critical factor in coming to any conclusion as to how to improve and the like. And I continue to be confused by the conflicting data that is presented. Let me illustrate my point. At page 33, you tell us that it takes about 70-odd seconds longer than anticipated for a person to stand on the platform. All right, that's a period of time. Then you look at page 46, and you look at what is the terminal time. Now, that's the usual marker of things. There's a point of beginning, and there's a point of end. And at some point, you have a measurement. According to that, on page 46, even after you have revised the schedule to allow additional time. On the number 2 train, half the time, almost 58%, you're not on time. On the number 5, 64%. On the number 4, 57%. And the situation deteriorates even further when you look at the weekend end of run, and you find on the number 4 line that only 21% of the time are you on time. Now, that on-time figure has 2 factors in it, as I understand it. One, there's a built-in factor of at least 5 minutes on the arrival at the terminal as compared with what you were scheduled to receive. Number 2, there is now the additional time provided by the revised schedule. And my concern with all of this is the following. I don't understand how you can rationalize these 2 pieces of apparently conflicting data and say that you're working on a sound predicate.
So there's a difference in terms of the way those are calculated. The on-time performance statistics are train-based, and they're terminal to terminal, looking to see if a train makes it in its scheduled time within 5 minutes. The customer-focused metrics that I talked about before, additional train time and additional platform time, are customer-focused, meaning we're using our internal models that demonstrate how customers use the system, and we're looking at the delay over their specific trip. And so the distinction, the significant distinction, is that most people are not traveling end to end on any one of these lines. So their travel time is much shorter on a train than the end-to-end running time that you would see here. They're still losing time relative to the schedule, and you see that with the 70 seconds or 71 seconds. But there's a big distinction in terms of what those 2 statistics are representing.
I understand what you're saying, but my point remains, if the train is late from beginning to end, the customer cannot get better service unless you're saying that the train gets delayed between the last station and the terminal. Just doesn't make sense.
That can happen, and that does happen sometimes. I think the fundamental difference is one is a measure of punctuality, one's a measure of reliability. Most people standing on a platform would not know if their train, the actual train they catch, is the one they should have caught. They would not know, and to be frank, they wouldn't care, right? A subway service is a turn-up-and-go service for the most part. It doesn't matter to the individual standing on the platform as long as the headway between trains is reliable and as long as the wait time is not excessive. Whereas on a railroad, for example, punctuality, I would argue, is a more important measure because it's not really turn up and go. You target a specific train. So there's a relationship between the 2, but we're actually measuring 2 different things.
The order is Mr. Glucksman, Mr. Vidiello, and then Mr. Greenberg.
Thank you. Real quick, if you've answered this question in the past and I didn't get the answer, I apologize. Why are we waiting until February to get February of 2019 to get MDBF on the R179s?
So the MDBF on that chart is a 12-month figure. Typically, when we receive new cars on property, we start, of course, monitoring their performance, but we publicly report at a year in service so that we have a full 12-month statistic.
Thank you.
Andy or Sally, I'm looking at all the statistics and the generally improving trend, and maybe I'm missing it and it's in here, but it feels like it screams for what is the ultimate objective for acceptable service across all these different categories, so that we know when we've gotten to the inflection point of that's as good as it's going to get and we're looking to just maintain it. Is that something that is in there, or am I missing it? Is that something we can look at in the future? And I think the obvious question, once you have that, would be, do we have a guess as to the time frame where we get to those acceptable metrics?
Dr. Sally will have a view on this, but my view would be, if you look at the data, and we talked about this earlier, there's one line that works a lot better than the others, which is the L line. That's no surprise, and there's no mystique about that. That line has modern signaling, and it is automatic train control, so the trains are evenly spaced. They have very predictable, very easily controlled acceleration, coasting, and braking profiles. It's an inherently easier line to operate. And it does have some advantages in that it is self-contained. But we should be aiming to see 90% statistics across all of our lines at some point. With the signaling system and the complexities that we currently have, I don't believe that we can get to that. What's needed, as I mentioned in my remarks, is a fundamental reconstruction of the signaling system and modern trains. But there are things that we can do in the meantime, which is why I made reference to a task force to take out at least 10,000 minutes per period.
I guess a question then is, okay, but without modern signaling on those lines and the other things the L line have, what should we think of as par today? And I'm not asking you to answer this in the meeting today, but I think we're talking about a span of, even in your most optimistic view, the better part of a decade to get to that type of paradigm on many of the lines. So what should we be holding up as par in the interim? And is that a reasonable thing to, because otherwise I don't know how to measure success. I get that we're improving, but I don't know how to actually measure whether we've gotten to success, and I don't know how good it's going to get, and I don't know how, if we can't get you the money, how do we know how good it's going to get and how long you think it will take to get to at least that interim state?
For me, job one was to stabilize what was, as I talked about in my comments, a precipitous decline. That the subway was noticeably declining. There were various high-profile incidents that had to be arrested, and I would argue, and the statistics show that we have arrested that decline. It's not getting any worse. In fact, and you'll recall the stats that I quoted, in many ways, things are now getting better. The way you said, if you can't get us the money, well, that to me is the doomsday scenario, because I think what would happen if we don't get the money to do what needs to be done, and I accept that a case needs to be made, which is why I talked about putting together a lobbying strategy. The reason I call it a doomsday scenario is, number one, you are condemning New York to not really get any better, because you will still be dealing with 1930s signaling and Cold War era trains and interlockings, but also ultimately getting the reliability improvement and the capacity uplift that we all know we need. That need won't go away. In fact, it'll get harder as the system ages even further. It'll get harder as more people use the system, and it'll get way more expensive. So that's why I call it the doomsday scenario. So it's hard to put a precise figure on what you might call what the improvement level is, because it's improvement within a finite range of improvement, I would say, with what's possible with very old equipment. The step change, the sea change, will only happen when we bite the bullet and invest in new equipment.
I have no doubt, and I agree with you, it's a doomsday scenario to think about not getting the investment. However, I think that what we're suffering from right now in public perception and our own expectations is a detachment from a proper expectation of what kind of performance can be achieved with the equipment that we have today. And I think that to the extent you could give some thought to and potentially could convey the best case scenario and what the duration is of even holding service at that best case scenario, what period of time that's realistic for. Because I imagine you might be able to say, look, if you needed me to hold this current system, non-L line, non-modern signal system, to a higher standard, I could probably get it to here, but I couldn't do that indefinitely, right? At some point it will start to continue to erode from under you. But I think we aren't painting a picture even for ourselves of how good can it get as we push you to say improve performance even on the old equipment for now, until we can get you and the state can get you a budget to undertake the major investment it needs. But I don't know what par is, so I see improving numbers, and I don't know what I should be expecting, when it's going to level off, and But if that's not a reasonable thing to ask of you, I'd like to have that conversation too. And again, I understand it may be something you need to give thought to.
So I think that's a fair challenge, and two reactions to that. One, the good news is, it's not as though we're doing nothing. As was mentioned in a previous answer, the Severn line, the Flushing line, will convert to CBTC this fall. We're letting contracts for Culver and for Queens Boulevard line. So things will improve. But I think the way that I can answer your question is when I do report back in September on the subway action plan, we'll also try to include a forecast, and that should be as a minimum to get back to what some time back used to be seen as a reasonable level of performance. Sally, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
I'll just add one thing. Certainly, we are in a position where we're seeing the stabilization of our performance and multiple signs of performance within the system, or improvement of performance within the system. But we are by no means saying that we have taken the improvement as far as it can go without the fast forward plan. We are making incremental improvements. We're committed to making incremental improvements, not just in the way that we deliver service every day, also in terms of reducing incidents that are caused by our own equipment and assets, and making a whole host of continuous improvements in terms of customer communications that Sarah Meyer has been the lead for, and we have made significant progress in that area, and there's still much more to do. So every day we see things that we know we can improve on, and many of those are things that are within our control in terms of the way that we're managing the system, and we're working on many fronts across the board to continue to put those improvements in place.
Yeah, I have no doubt, and we're seeing the improvement. I guess it's the desire to manage the sort of conflicting realities that we want better improvement, and faster, more improvement, but at the same time, I think we need to make sure we have the data points from your perspective to understand how long the improvement can maintain, because your own success can in fact end up putting off the public's perception of your need for the money. If you can wave the magic wand and make this old system run adequately, we run the risk of, if people don't understand, that can't be done forever. In fact, eroding the support for exactly the thing that needs to happen to improve it for the long term. And so I think the combination of what is par for improvement today, but how long can that be maintained? And it's a complicated equation, I'm sure, and I'm sure there's economic impact to maintaining it. At some point, I would imagine maintaining it has a cost that starts to rival that of making the investment over the long term to make it run much better, much more efficiently. So these are a lot of things that I think probably a lot of board members are thinking about, but I think it's important for the narrative that you'll need to undertake and explain.
So I think that's a very insightful point, and there is a law of diminishing returns in how much investment you can throw at ancient equipment, and there's only so much you can coax out of it. But in any case, it's not just about service reliability, it's also about capacity, and this signaling system cannot allow us to run more trains. So those are the two arguments we have to make. It's not just reliability, important though that is, it's also about capacity.
Yeah, so overall, I'm just saying, set the expectation and whatever it is, and I think, for the public and for us, that'll be a good paradigm going forward. And you can tell us, don't expect more than this, and don't expect it for more than this period of time, and then at least we understand what we're shooting for. Thank you.
Yes. I remember when I worked in the legislature, someone told me that they think that there are too many requirements for this agency and it produces too many reports. I guess there's an argument to that, because the last argument here seemed to ignore. We have something called we have an annual report. We're required to do it by legislation. We also have something called the Strategic Operations Plan. They both contain goals for on-time performance, for weight assessment, for all these things. In fact, I'll read them to you. For weight assessment, it's 80.7%. That was last year. For terminal on-time performance, Commissioner Merdler's favorite, that's 75%. I mean, there's a whole bunch of them here. We're not meeting them. It shows that we're failing. I mean, I think those are the goals. That's what I think Commissioner Vitiello was talking about. Those are the goals we're trying to meet right now. And so I couldn't find the Strategic Operations Plan, which actually had line-by-line goals, which we failed to meet. I think that's the answer to his question. That's what we've said we're going to try to do under the current situation. We're not doing that. So we're like 10% below in one case and 20% below in another. I mean, right now, I don't know, this was back in 2017, we're a little bit better. But we're not, I don't fear the fear Commissioner Votella had that somehow we're going to do so well that people say, well, see, you don't need CBTC. I think President Byford, you're completely correct. We can't, one of the reasons why we may not be able to meet even our present goals is the crowding, the heavy on, heavy off at many stations that's causing these eternal delays, if you will, or slow-moving trains or backups that are really the problem. And, terminal on-time performance, it may be better if it drops. You may have better service throughout the line, and I think the thing to look at if you want to look at the legacy indicators is weight assessment. That's the thing that no one really understands what it means unless you get a full explanation and sit down and think about it. But that's what I would suggest, because it's a legacy indicator. It's been around a long time for us to gauge ourselves by. Certainly the platform, I'm all for the new ones more than most people, but I think we're going to start looking. It's on a 0 to 100 scale. It's something people understand since grade school. I think that might be a way of talking about it. It's in our annual report. It's in our strategic operations plan. That would be my suggestion, to look at that for goals.
Mr. Albert.
Do we have a time frame for the procurement for the R211 fleet? Do we know when that contract's going to be let out? Are they bidding yet, or? Oh, Steve left the room, so. No, thanks.
Good morning. Today on fixed routes, our report today will touch on some of the fast-forward deliverables that the team has recently accomplished. As you know, we are soon approaching the launch of our first network redesign in Staten Island on August 19th. We've already begun sending out special mobile information centers and customer ambassadors at key locations to distribute information to our express bus customers and answer some of their questions. At the same time, we are working towards our next network redesign in the Bronx with upcoming public participation sessions later in the year. In parallel to our network redesign goals, we continue to push ahead with numerous other fast-forward initiatives. We will be increasing off-peak frequency on 3 bus routes, the B17, the B65, and the S93. These are routes where we see potential demand and we have the available equipment and capacity. We also continue to work jointly with New York City DOT on other bus priority and traffic improvement measures on high-priority corridors, and will continue to update you as we implement improvements in the coming months. As part of this process, we implemented traffic signal priority on the B35. This will speed up buses for approximately 30,000 weekday customers on one of our busiest routes in Brooklyn. I would also like to thank our partners at New York City Police Department for their traffic enforcement efforts. The NYPD plays a key role in our Fast Forward plan when it comes to prioritizing bus service and making our buses move faster. I'm happy to report that this year the NYPD issued over 165,000 traffic violation summonses, an increase of 12% as compared to the same period last year. We have recently held several productive meetings to address high-priority traffic spots. We had a very productive meeting with Chief Chan. I promised last month that we would do that, so we're very, very encouraged by that. In May, Queens North Road Operations Managers, that's my team, along with NYPD, from the 103rd and 107th precincts conducted a successful joint blitz to move traffic faster on Hillside Avenue at Union Turnpike in Queens during the AM peak. And we look forward to implementing other joint initiatives prioritizing bus service. Finally, I cannot reiterate enough how important customer feedback is to our process. We continue to solicit and incorporate this feedback into all of our initiatives. I will continue to brief you on our progress in the upcoming months. And that completes the fixed route report. Now on to paratransit. We continue to meet regularly and work closely with the Paratransit Task Force to improve communication, reliability, and transparency. On Wednesday, Commissioner Vanderpool will be presenting task force highlights at the board meeting. Performance on a 12-month average remains stable over overall, in spite of a 15% growth in ridership as compared to last year. We experienced a slight dip in performance due to a few days where our GPS monitoring system experienced some outages. In May, we are reporting approximately 173,000 e-hail trips as compared to 147,000 in April. The on-demand portion of the pilot, in which approximately 1,200 customers are enrolled, now represents a total of 62,000 trips since the beginning of the pilot. To that end, we are requesting the approval of a budget adjustment to provide additional funds for continued paratransit e-hail services being provided by Verifone, which was referenced by many of the speakers today. We fully recognize the unprecedented flexibility that on-demand e-hail offers to our customers and are working to develop a second phase of the pilot where we will focus on the expand on-demand services in a sustainable way. Lessons learned from the first phase of the pilot and from e-hail models in use at other paratransit agencies throughout the country will help inform this second phase. We must also consider existing capacity issues along with our ADA mandates. We will get back to you on this in September. I'd also like to thank the entire bus team and paratransit team, along with my colleagues at System Safety. At the recent incident in the Flatiron District, we leaned forward and we took advantage of our technology and ran what we call a breadcrumb report to find out where our employees and our equipment was during that explosion. And we were very proactive in triaging our people and our equipment. And so I'm very proud of that, and thank you, Carl, for the work that you've done with us. And that completes the report.
Yeah. Ms. Vanterpool?
Will we be discussing the V82 any further, or is this the opportunity now for me to make a brief comment on it?
I think when we get to service adjustment.
Okay. Sounds good.
Hearing nothing else, I'd, on behalf of the committee, like to welcome Mr. Elagudin to this table and ask him to make his first report on accessibility.
Well, I'm super excited to be making my first report and also to be joining the New York City Transit team as a senior advisor for accessibility. And most importantly, I'm incredibly honored to be representing the disability community here at the MTA on accessibility issues. My first month here at Transit has really been all about learning, meeting all the many different units and teams that touch accessibility in one shape or one form or another. And I'm working with all the different units to try to create a unified, comprehensive accessibility workflow on an array of different issues. And obviously, I'm sure that'll take me many, many years to get to. Some of the items that I'll be talking about, we can expect to see by the end of the year, and other ones going into the future. And, you know, I know that we can't do this alone, and certainly not without the feedback of the community. One of the first things I'll be working on through the end of the year is making sure we have much more community engagement. And the disability community can certainly look forward to more meetings, more regular meetings, meetings that happen here, meetings that happen out in the community. And we'll definitely be getting feedback and creating different structures to take that feedback in and make sure we're functioning in a way that the community approves of and that they're part of the decision-making process. We're currently working on a couple items. One is we're doing a thorough review of the ADA trainings being done by bus operators and train conductors to make sure that it has all the most up-to-date accessibility information. And we're working on creating a ADA sensitivity and disability etiquette training that will be mandated for all New York City employees that will provide best practices for interacting with customers with disabilities, no matter at which point they touch the system. Also, as you know, there's currently a study going on underway on all the inaccessible train stations to see what it would take to make them accessible. We have engaged the community on this study to see which factors they consider most important in making determinations on the next stations. And once that moves forward a little bit more, we will definitely be talking to the community to make sure they're involved in the decision as to which stations come first in the next round of ADA stations. Also, we are working very diligently to make sure we do a better job of communicating on elevator and escalator outages. One of the things that you'll be seeing very soon is we'll be posting alternative route information directly on the elevators, so that in case someone does encounter an elevator that's out of service in the system, they'll see right then and there how can they potentially go around that. Also, a little bit more in the future, but soon, we're making sure that all of our accessible routing technology that's web-based or app-based takes into account elevator outages in real time, so you can find alternative routes, you know, even before you start your trip, before you even encounter that elevator. Also, as part of the elevator and escalator outage work that we're doing, we're doing a review of our maintenance practices to make sure that they are as comprehensive as possible to mitigate any breakdowns before they happen. And that is something that we'll be doing throughout this year and probably into the future. And it's particularly helpful with the new elevator, with new elevator installs that have a lot more diagnostic technology on them that helps us to find that out in real time. Lastly, as part of the Fast Forward commitment, we're looking at bus designs, and we've started that right now with the pilot that's happening with the new MCI bus, which provides improved accessibility with a first-of-its-kind low-entry vestibule and automated ramp, allowing for easy boarding for customers with wheelchairs and mobility devices. As was mentioned by one of the public speakers today, we are still taking customer feedback and hope to have comprehensive feedback to provide to the design for its final use before procurement. That is just a snippet of the accessibility items that I'm working on and working on as a team. It's obviously a lot, and it's certainly going to be challenging, but I'm very dedicated, as well as all of us at Transit, to meeting these challenges and creating greater accessibility in our system. And that completes my first report. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no questions, Mr. Albert.
Welcome to the team, Alex. Pleasure to have you here. Have you or Sally determined what criteria you would find important to decide which are the next stations to get elevators?
Well, I think the short answer is no, but in terms of what the study is looking at, we've identified 8 to 10 different criteria that we want the study to inform us on. Once we have those, ultimately it will be a conversation with the community as to which ones are done first. There are all kinds of factors from proximity to activity centers, to cost, to engineering challenges. And honestly, if we have a conversation with the community and they say, we want this one, we think this is most important, but that one happens to be expensive and it happens to be quite the engineering challenge, if everybody feels strongly about it, then that's the direction that we'll head in. If the community and us feel like, hey, we'd rather get 4 elevators for this one, then that's a decision that we'll make. So it's really going to be an interactive and kind of engagement to make those decisions, because there are no easy decisions to be made here.
Thank you.
Okay. Now I'd like to ask Ms. Meyer to make the strategy and customer experience report.
Good morning. It's been a busy month for the strategy and customer experience team as we continue to deliver service information and help our customers navigate the transit system and all of its planned work. Compared to last month, customer interactions from email, social media, and the call center decreased by 7.5%, perhaps signifying a better month of service delivery. Year over year, the number of customer calls answered by agents increased by 14%, and customer wait time decreased by 38%, 169 seconds. Per your recommendation from last month, we have been testing and implementing a wait time and callback service for our 511 calls. And we recently rolled out a new upgrade to our B Division countdown clocks, allowing us to insert delay and incident messaging at a quicker pace. We've been working hand in hand with buses on the first wave of community outreach for the Staten Island bus redesign and posted a more detailed map with routes and stops. We will be training additional customer ambassadors that will be deployed throughout the next month to ensure a smooth rollout. We have also attended or led 18 public meetings with the community throughout the 5 boroughs. And this week, as President Byford mentioned, we will be rolling out our first quarterly customer commitment, detailing the ways we will be improving the customer experience over the next quarter. We are looking forward to your feedback.
Is there anything from Ms. Meyer? Mr. Weisbrot.
Do you have a sense of, on wait times for callbacks, how many people who call just decide after waiting for a minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes or 4 minutes just to hang up?
We do have those reports, and I'll be able to make them available at our next board meeting.
Thank you. Now I'll ask Mr. Heyman to make the safety report.
Thank you. Subway fires are relatively flat when comparing the previous 12-month periods. Bus collisions, collision injuries, and customer accidents continue to decrease when comparing the previous 12-month periods as well. Subway customer accidents increase when comparing them between the previous 12-month periods, and we continue to work with Department of Subways to reverse that trend. It is worth noting, though, that we've had a slight decrease when comparing it on a monthly basis. Employee lost time accidents continue a downward trend when comparing the most recent 12-month period with the previous 12 months. And New York City Transit continues to make steady progress against all our leading indicator goals, and the Office of System Safety continues to make progress on the initiatives identified in the Fast Forward Plan. And that completes the safety report.
Thank you. Are there any questions on Mr. Merdler and then Mr. Albert?
Mr. Heyman, you and I have been talking about this offline. In connection with the subway fires, have you been able to identify which of those fires are within the station area as contrasted with tunnels and the like?
I have people working on breaking that out right now, and I'll have that information to you later today.
The reason I asked the question...
Could you send that to the entire committee?
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
The reason I asked the question is where it is within the platform area. It seems to me that there are things that we can do to narrow that problem or to help deal with it. Not just platform screen doors, which are being expanded in the United Kingdom extensively, and I'll give you the book on it in a little while. But in areas such as dealing with what we do with allowing food to be served, which is an issue that I keep bringing up from time to time. So could we try and identify whether the increased fires, and they are increasing, are at the platform level or in the tunnel? All right? The second question I have for you is this. The subway customer accidents, are those occurring within the station or on the train?
The majority of them are in the station itself.
I'm sorry?
In the station.
In the station. And have you been able, as you were able to do on the trains, to identify where they are? Are they at the toll booths or the wherever you go through?
The token booths, right. Turnstiles, right.
Or are they on the platforms?
Most of them are on the stairs and the platforms. There has been an increase in the areas of the turnstiles, which is what we had talked about in the previously.
And that I was hoping that might be the case, because could you take a look at the individual stairs in terms of the maintenance of the stairway treads? For example, on the outdoor subway systems in the Bronx, when that was examined some time back, it was found that they had been worn away, and that was a contributing factor. If that is the case as well on the indoor subway trains, we may be able to minimize the number of those accidents. All right?
We'll do that. Additionally, what we're doing is working with stations to make sure that the identification and the investigation process drills down to the exact cause and that the defects are being categorized correctly.
It's just a way perhaps of minimizing some of them.
We'll do that.
Okay. Mr. Albert, did you have something?
Yeah, quickly on the fires. Is the predominant cause track bed litter or electrical caused?
It's just over 60% is debris for the right-of-way flyers, correct.
And is that debris from things falling in the tunnels or passenger debris from people throwing things down on the track bed or wind blowing things onto the track bed?
I mean, it's debris on the track bed, so the presumption is that a lot of it has to do with litter.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're ready for the crime report. And Chief Delatorre.
Good morning, everybody. I'm pleased to report that total major felonies remain down within the subway system year-to-date with a 5.5% decrease or 66 fewer incidents for the first half of this year. During the month of June, there were 9 fewer major felonies than during the same month last year. Again, a 4.5% decrease with 192 crimes versus 201. There were 10 additional felony assaults, 6 fewer grand larcenies, and 11 fewer robberies for the month. For the month of June, 38% of the total major felonies were in Manhattan, 35% in Brooklyn, 16% in the Bronx, and 10% in Queens. I want to commend the riding public and the members of the New York City Transit who are on the front lines. As the police commissioner and I have said many times, keeping our city and our subways safe is a shared responsibility. Subway crime is down in nearly all categories year-to-date, and I have witnessed firsthand how the public and the New York City Transit employees have played a role in keeping crime down to near historic lows. I know that with continued collaboration between our offices and the transit employees and with the help of the ridership, who increasingly refuse to turn a blind eye toward crime and disorder in our trains, we will reduce crime and improve the sense of safety and security even more. With that, I wish to wish everybody a safe and enjoyable summer, and I welcome any questions or suggestions you may have at this time.
Mr. Merdler.
Chief, this is my favorite hobby horse, if I may. What is Transit District 34? Where is it? Transit District 34.
It's in Brooklyn.
It has a 500% increase in anti-Semitic incidents. I'd like to know, if not today, then in the future, what can we do to drill down on that and get rid of it?
Well, we will speak about that. Overall, anti-Semitic incidents within the system are down 45% for this year.
I'm aware of that.
So we'll take a look at 34. In the past, we've had incidents where they were random in a bathroom, and we went over that, and I think I had spoken to you about it. And they were also spaced out in the course of 10 or 11 months. But we'll certainly take a closer look at 34 for you.
My point being that whether they be anti-Muslim, whether they be anti-black, or anti-anything, we have to nip it in the bud before it gets worse. And here's one where you see, hopefully, an aberration.
Yep.
But let's make sure it's an aberration.
Absolutely.
Anyone else? Then I'll ask Mr. Mulligan to talk about ridership.
So we're going to bring the presentation up on the screen. Bear with us a minute. Today, good afternoon. We're going to talk about ridership trends. First, we're going to go to the long-term ridership trends for transit. The orange line is subway ridership. The gray line is bus ridership, including MTA Bus Company. Some of these numbers are familiar to you. We've been reporting on them for some time. As you can see, the decline in ridership on buses started in 2014. Ridership on subways leveled off in 15 and 16 and started declining last year in 17 and has continued that decline year to date through 18, down 2.1%. And the bus ridership decline has continued year to date as well. Those year to dates are through May. We are not alone. This is part of a national and international trend where other U.S. and international agencies on average are experiencing declines in subway and bus ridership. This chart compares New York City Transit to other national large agencies for subway and bus ridership trends. And as you can see, bus ridership declines began earlier at other properties at a larger scale. Our trend and pattern on bus ridership is quite similar to those of other properties. Next, we wanted to get behind the averages and break down different times of day to get to the different forces that are working on our ridership trends. So this rather busy and colorful chart shows weekday subway ridership broken down by time of day. So what you see is the dotted red line is the average, and it hews very close to the red line, which is the peak ridership that has most of the volume. And the point is that the purple line, the late night travel, was the first to experience a decline after 14 and 15 and 16. Meanwhile, peak ridership continued to increase, and ridership on a percentage basis before the peak, which isn't high in volume, but as a percentage, continued to grow quite dramatically. As we progressed through 16 and 17, you see that the declines took hold in other parts of the day, and most recently has brought the peak down as well in 17 and even flattened out that previous area of high growth before the morning peak. This looks at where the ridership is. We're breaking down subway ridership by borough, and the point is that the outer boroughs are experiencing the largest declines, again in percentage terms. Here you can see Bronx and Staten Island Bronx and Queens went from positive ridership growth annually on the subway in 16 to declines in 17 and 18 to date. And we'll get into those reasons as we go forward. This table shows modal shifts, and it gives you the absolute total annual ridership for all the modes: subway and buses, for-hire vehicles and taxis, bikes and ferries. I want to call your attention to the right-hand column, the second number down, the 13.1%. That is the annual change from 16 to 17 in for-hire vehicle and taxi ridership. 13.1% for a single year. It is more than the nearly 12% growth you see for the cumulative four-year period, 12 through 16. And the actual amount of riders that were added to for-hire vehicle and taxi market is strikingly similar to the same number of riders that we see a decline in subways and buses for the year 17. The other interesting thing on this chart is the bottom row, which shows the annual percentage change in total rides or total trips taken. And despite earlier growth quite significant in 13 and 14, you can see that the total ridership, total trips, has leveled off and is actually flat for 17. And this is for all modes other than private vehicles. Looking more closely and combining the modal shift to for-hire vehicles and looking at the time of day analysis gives us this chart, which is looks at the change of hourly annual average ridership compared in for-hire vehicles and taxis on the orange line to the blue line for subways. And you can see the symmetry here is striking. As the orange line goes up, the blue line goes down, and vice versa for almost the entire period of the day at a very similar scale. This is the best analysis and evidence that we've had to date of not just a correlation between for-hire vehicle growth and subway ridership decline, but actually causation. There are other modes in play in modal shift. Private automobiles, we've seen an increase in vehicle registration, an increase in traffic on our bridges and tunnels. Bike travel is up, although the numbers are not significant enough to be a major factor in our ridership change. Next, I want to talk about different origin and destination trips and how the ridership decline varies based upon where you're going. And these are AM peak numbers from May of 17 comparing to May of 18. And what you see is our ridership is holding much more strongly in and out of the central business district, the traditional commuting. In fact, within the lower Manhattan, the central business district, we're actually seeing an increase in ridership. But there is a borough difference about where people live that are coming into the to the CBD in terms of their changes. But overall, this market's down only 0.3%. Contrast that to the second map. The second map shows weekday ridership on subways within and among the boroughs. And here you see much more significant declines. Our ridership is declining much more frequently, much more significantly the further you are from the central business district, and trips that are between and among the boroughs are affected much more by this decline. Again, causation or correlation, looking at the next map, this compares it to for-hire vehicle and taxi growth. And you see the green, which is the neighborhoods that are furthest away from lower Manhattan, have the largest increase in for-hire vehicle use. The scale is correct. Those bright green numbers are showing growth in the annual percentage basis, more than 50%, the darkest green more than 200%. And this is 24-hour data compared to the AM data we showed earlier. The patches of blue are where the for-hire vehicle market and ridership is not increasing. And I would just note that if you look at the Upper East Side, probably because of our efforts in the opening of 2nd Avenue Subway, ridership for for-hire and taxi is down in those areas. So where we're able to expand capacity, we are competing more favorably on this modal shift. There's economic trends at play as well in this geographic pattern of the ridership trends that we're seeing. Employment is growing overall in the city, but it's growing faster in the outer boroughs. So the historical architecture of the system, which is bringing people in from residential neighborhoods to their jobs in the central business district, is being challenged by these different patterns of growth. We're also seeing faster growth in industries that have non-traditional commuting hours, increases in telecommuting, but really the largest proportion of the ridership decline is affecting discretionary trips. And this gets back to what we talked about earlier about the leveling off of total trips made. Retail is shifting away from brick and mortar. We're seeing a decline in New York City brick and mortar employment. More people are making purchases through their smartphones. More people are entertaining themselves and watching movies on their smartphones or devices at home. And some people are socializing on their devices and not making trips for other reasons where they normally would have traveled in person. More evidence of this is if you look at our time-based products, 30-day unlimited and 7-day unlimited passes, the total trips per card are down over the last. So even trips that our customers have paid for, they're taking fewer trips. And that is similar to what the London survey found that saw a decline in total trips per passenger. Moving on to more home explanations for this phenomenon, we are doing a tremendous amount of work in our system, and we've changed how we're doing our work. We're being more aggressive about full-time closures for stations and aggressive closures for significant improvements to lines or segments of lines. And if you just look at the 6 or 7 projects depicted on this chart, you can see that in 18 there's over 35,000 riders that were affected by these full-time closures. Obviously, it's important to get in quickly, get the work done, and get it finished so the ridership continues. But this amount of work, we're paying a price not just through the capital budget, but we're paying a price on the impact on our customers, and that's reflected in the ridership. These handful of projects account for 11% of the weekday ridership decline in 18 year to date. And this amount of work represents a nearly doubling of what a similar list looked like in 17. But we're not just working with full closures, we're also increasing the work that we're doing overnight. And we're seeing, as you look at these individual periods, the overnight work, the weekend work, the midday work, we're seeing a real proportionality to the times of day where we're really increasing our efforts and the impact on ridership. So, for example, overnight, ridership is down 4.8% compared to the weekday average of 2.8%. And on the weekends, where we're doing more work, ridership is down even more significantly. Moving on to bus ridership, we've talked more frequently about bus ridership trends because it's been a longer-term trend. And when we spoke last spring, we pointed out that there was evidence of a large migration from bus riders to subway on routes that overlap. We're still seeing that overlap, but not nearly to the extent as we were in the spring. The bus ridership declines are more widespread, and they are increasing as we move forward in time. And this brings us back to the modal shift to for-hire vehicles and the growth of that market with taxis. Finally, an additional factor is fare evasion. Fare evasion continues to grow. It is a factor we've looked over multiple years. We believe as much as half of the bus ridership decline since 2014 is attributable to the growth in fare evasion. Subway fare evasion has increased to 0.7% in the first quarter of 2018, but we do not believe this is a major factor in the overall ridership decline. Finally, and perhaps most puzzlingly, we've had a very significant decline in student ridership, both on subway, depicted in the solid blue line, and on buses, depicted in the dotted line on the chart. This has increased over time. Students are using our system less frequently, and no factor brings that home more directly than the fact that even on a per student MetroCard basis, the number of trips are down almost 10% in the last couple of years. This is somewhat troubling and mysterious to us. The enrollment numbers look to be stable over this period of time. We're distributing the same number of student MetroCards to the Department of Education that we normally do, but yet we're seeing the decline in student ridership. It's bus and subway. So going back, the buses is the dotted line and subway is the blue line. So in conclusion, the ridership, the dynamics they're working on our ridership are much more complex than they've ever been before. And particularly as we look at how we budget and project revenues, we have to get much more sophisticated. It used to be that we would look at employment projections for Manhattan, and the direct relationship between employment growth and ridership growth was something we could rely on for our projections. We're getting more sophisticated. We have to look at a multiplicity of factors, and how these factors play out over time, since they're so new, is something that we're watching, digging in more deeply to, and we'll continue to update you on as we understand more. I'm willing to take any questions.
Okay. Mr. Albert, Dr. Metzger, and Mr. Weisbrod, and then Mr. Merdler.
Tim, I'm really glad that the last few slides showed the amount of work that's going on in the system, because I think there is a definitive link between all of the GOs and the rise in Uber and Lyft and other for-hire services. I can't tell you how many people who walk down into a station, see a wall of diversion notices and say, I'm not dealing with this, and go up and hire a car. I mean, it's definitely a piece of the picture. I think, and I've spoken to Sarah about this, we have to do a better job of outlining what diversions are taking place to the line you're actually entering, and then in a totally different place show connecting lines and what's happening on those lines. Because when you're met with a whole wall of service diversion notices, you don't want to deal with it. And it's off-putting, and I think it's hurting ridership, people that would otherwise have taken the system, but say, and, I know that we have to do the work. I'm not saying don't do the work, but we have to do a better message at where and when this work is being done and how it affects the line you're actually entering.
Yeah, we're working very hard on improving that messaging, as Sarah discussed today. And I think you also see in the disparate impact further away from the central business district, that's where the alternative service plans may be more disruptive. And there may be fewer good alternatives, so it stands to reason that the work would have a greater impact.
Absolutely. That's why Midtown, because you have so many lines so close to each other, people can deal with it a block or two away. In the outer boroughs, you don't have that option.
But that's why Fast Forward and the initiative of doing the bus network redesigns in the outer boroughs is so crucial, because as that employment market grows, and as we are limited by our capacity to serve, given the spoke and hub system, we need to build service that handles those between the boroughs and intra-borough markets better through our bus system.
Dr. Metzger.
This was really a fascinating presentation. And notwithstanding the individual reasons behind the transit decline, I can see how some of them also impact the railroads in different ways. Although we have some incredible growth in parts of Metro North, we have decreases elsewhere, and it rather much follows some of the patterns that you've described. Could you shoot us that presentation so I could look at it more carefully?
Absolutely. And
Thank
we'll be
you.
happy to collaborate with our colleagues at the railroads.
I think they would profit from seeing it.
Mr.
Certainly will.
Weisbrot.
Yes, I also want to
And
commend
I
you.
didn't mean to step on that suggestion, which is send it to everybody.
We will.
I also want to commend you, Tim, on really a terrific presentation analysis. And I'm glad you're distributing it to everyone, because I think it has implications even beyond transit. I think that it provides a strong basis for congestion pricing, in my view, as well. The growth in, I have two questions, Tim. One, the growth in transit ridership, particularly on the subways, seems to have been particularly great initially in poor neighborhoods in the outer boroughs where employment has increased dramatically over the last 3 or 4 years. And so I'm wondering, you've shown some borough analysis. I'm wondering if the decline in those poorer neighborhoods where we have seen tremendous employment growth, and for the most part that employment growth is not telecommuting by any means, is as dramatic as the proportionally as the initial run-up, and that's my first question, and whether you could drill down to that if you haven't. And I guess the second question, which you touched on, and maybe it's slightly premature, but it's a question I raised earlier with Mr. Byford, which is what this means in terms, and what will we do with this, or what can we do with this in terms of projections for 2019, in terms of our capital and operational priorities in terms of 2019 and the like, and whether that in fact is the next step in this.
To answer your first question, we're definitely trying to drill down much further on the outer borough effects, right? There's obviously data challenges there and more work to be done, and linking that up with employment. I think what we find is it's not that we don't see the positive correlation with job creation. Job creation's in a different place, right? And so it's a challenge for us to do a better job of servicing that. The additional challenge of this data is if you hold on to your peak service ridership, yet you're experiencing overall losses that are larger, your capacity challenges and your reliability challenge associated with your peak load remains very high. Yet you're losing those customers further out. Those were easy customers for us to have. There was capacity on the trains. The service was there, right? So that is a particular challenge that this data presents. In terms of how this affects our planning, it's already affected our revenue projections in terms of we've taken out a lot of expected fare box revenue for 18 and 19 based on what we've learned about ridership. We'll continue to update that as we go forward, and I think that it has important implications for capital planning as well.
Do we think in the crudest terms that these trends, absent any other earth-shaking events, will continue, that is, declines will continue?
Well, we're taking a lot of actions in the bus action plan as part of Fast Forward to arrest the decline in bus ridership, right? Also, another piece of Fast Forward is to do more around fare evasion, particularly on buses. And in the coming months, I think you'll see more from us on how we plan to do that. So we are very much actively trying to intervene, right? That being said, this is part of a much larger trend than us, right? We may be doing more construction. There may be other factors particular to us, but our GOs are not bringing down ridership in Chicago and Sao Paulo. So, part of this is a larger trend. I'm no expert on the for-hire vehicle market. I know the pricing dynamic and the regulatory environment for that industry is changing. I don't think all the dust is settled in terms of what that regulatory environment and pricing is going to settle down into. The evolution has been very quick. I think that's part of the answer of what the long-term trends are. But we're looking at these things much more closely and following a lot more strains of evidence than we have in the past.
Mr. Merdler, then Mr. Reckler.
I wonder whether, when you look at student ridership, there would be a useful purpose also in looking at college students. They, in many cases, city colleges and the like, are people without considerable funds and live frequently from hand to mouth. And query, are they the kind of people, and this is a discussion we will have later, who deserve some form of break in the amount of fares they're charged? But query, can we improve service for them and increase the use of the buses, for example, are probably the kind of service that the college students will need more and more?
Absolutely, and that brings up a good point, which is the farebox data is limited in terms of how much insight into the demographics of our customers available. So we are engaged in surveys. There are other methodologies to get at different questions like the market of college students and what would best serve them and how are they reflected in these overall aggregate numbers.
Mr. Reckler, then Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Tim, great presentation. 2 points or questions. One, how do we determine how much this relates to service? Because at that one slide where you showed during peak hours where you had the HOV versus subway and you had that decline, it was like 6% and 5% incline versus decline. That correlation would argue to me that where people really are concerned about getting to work on time, they decided they can't rely on our subway system and went for a for-hire vehicle versus subway system. So I imagine that carries through the whole day. A lot of people, doctor's appointments, school, getting home, et cetera. And so as we're executing on the subway action plan and hopefully improving our service, we should, I guess, at least figure out how we can monitor that and track that hopefully more people will come and be riders on the system again. And the second point, then I'll let you respond, is it struck me a little bit on the population growth, because you look at Queens and Brooklyn as an example where there's been a big increase in population and job growth, and yet you had the larger declines of use there. I mean, it would be interesting to see this sort of factored into a weighting based on population growth and decline of ridership, and I bet you would even be more pronounced that areas where we've had that population growth, ridership has declined as a percentage even more.
Yeah, I think to your latter point, Brooklyn is a different case, right? There's been more job growth there. The traditional commute is holding much better in Brooklyn. I think the reverse commute is also much stronger because people are coming into Brooklyn for work. But it's a very different case in Queens, right? And that's something that we have to understand more. And to your first point, the starkest illustration of that is when a station is closed, when a line is only working one direction, right? So focusing on the construction is really the most tangible way that we can look at, what's the impact on ridership of service. That concept plays out through incidents and through other things that are not as significant as closing a station for months or a GO over the course. A fast track that's overnight every weeknight, Monday through Friday. So there's obviously a continuum of impact, right? we're very mindful that there's a price to be paid in terms of our customers' convenience and service when we go and do work, but unfortunately that's a necessary step we have to take to improve the reliability and bring service back so that we can attract riders back. One of our greatest concerns is, particularly with these outages, how much riders are we going to get back after that? We're looking very closely. Myrtle, Viaduct, it's a good story. It looks like the ridership's coming back, but that's something we're following very closely to make sure that, when we do disrupt service, we're able to regain those customers after the improvements are made.
I'd encourage you to also just look at performance of which lines and that correlation, because I agree with you. When you close down a line for construction, that's pretty meaningful. But the better performing lines, it'd be interesting to see if they're also retaining ridership better than the ones that are performing less well.
We'll certainly take a look at that.
Thank you.
I think anybody who's lived in New York for any period of time knows that the big tension that renters face all the time is, as rents go up, where do they move? And what is the biggest issue they try to avoid when they're forced to move because of increasing rents? Longer commutes. I find in the Hotel Workers Union, which is a pretty good little sort of case study, we track where our members live because we provide services to them through wholly owned medical facilities. So we want to know where they live because where we invest in medical facilities matters in terms of their convenience to get back and forth to it. And we see members over the last decade and a half being forced to move further and further out of Manhattan, certain neighborhoods in Brooklyn and Queens, and further out. And their commutes become miserable, long, and difficult. For a person who lives in Far Rockaway, for example, a commute to Manhattan to work in a hotel at 7 o'clock in the morning is an adventure every day. It really is. And I could bring you hundreds of room attendants to make that trip every day, and they could each tell you about what they go through and how horrible it is. One of the things that was really interesting to me on the chart that you just showed was I had thought, aside from stations closing for repairs where it's obvious that large numbers of people will seek alternatives, I think it's obvious that the other place where people will seek alternatives is to avoid bad service in general. But I had always thought that the people that would most likely go to Uber are people with financial resources. But on your charts, you see people who live in neighborhoods like Far Rockaway, where we don't have people who live, for example, in Far Rockaway, who are the most affluent people in the city. That's where you seem to have some really low, some very, very high reductions in the fare box, which I believe means that lots of people are seeking alternative means of transportation like Uber. I think it's very interesting that people that apparently have less financial means are seeking a more expensive solution, when intuitively you would think that people with more financial means would be using them. And I think it says a lot how so many people in the city without financial resources are so greatly inconvenienced by the transit system that they're forced to spend money they can't afford to spend to have reliable transit service. I just think that, to me, that's what I got out of this. I don't know if I'm drawing the right conclusion, but at least to me that seems to make a lot of sense. I'd love to know if there's a way for us to take a look at what it is. For example, is it possible to get from Uber, as we work with them and as they look to be licensed more and have greater privileges in the city, to ask them to provide us with some information about the earning capacity of people that use their service? They don't have to give us names, but can they tell us? Because all that information is stuff they track. Anybody that uses a credit card, they know all about that person. All that information is constantly reviewed, sold, bought by other marketing agencies. I wonder if we could get some kind of a profile from them. It would be very interesting to see exactly what, how much money people, what economic strata people are in, who are their biggest users. And I'd like to look at that from neighborhood to neighborhood. But if it's true that people that live all the way out in Far Rockaway, as an example again, are bigger and bigger users of Uber, even though they're the ones least likely to be able to afford it, I think that speaks volumes to the quality of the service.
I mean, we will definitely look into that additional information that you meant. I think the other issue, and people have suggested, you have the for-hire vehicle drivers themselves. 3 years ago, they might have been commuting to a job on the system, right? Now they're car owners. They're working part-time, non-traditional hours. They also live disproportionately further away, and they may be providing transportation, sometimes through the service, sometimes informally, and that may be a factor in these numbers as well. But we're definitely looking. The other piece is the total rides going down. You think about the price comparison. When you've already invested in an unlimited card and you're using that less frequently, that's not a particularly price-sensitive decision. So you have the overall number of trips. Population's going up. The number of trips is flat, so trips per person is going down. So the pie's shrinking as well as the modal transfer with for hires. Both dynamics are happening simultaneously.
Mr. Mulligan, as you focus on the answer to that very good question, would you please share the results with the remainder of the committee?
We will.
Okay. If there's nothing else, New York City Transit and Staten Island Rail Finance Report, Ms. Patel.
In the interest of time, I'll just take questions if you have any.
If there are none, thank you for the brevity of your report. MTA Bus Finance, Mr. Irick. Works for me. Hearing none. Capital Program, Mr. O'Grady.
I'm willing to do the same, but I'm not sure lightning strikes 3 times, so I'll go quickly. Capital Program Report. 8 projects were awarded during May 2018, totaling $104.1 million. This included rehabilitation of Circuit Breaker House 586 on the Culver Line, in-house mainline track replacement projects on 6th Avenue Culver, West End Line, as well as Lenox and White Plains Road Line, along with mainline switch replacement project on the White Plains Road Line. There were 3 substantial completions during the month, totaling $44.7 million. I won't get into the details there. And highlights in June of 2000 through June of 2018 included the completion of the Station Condition Survey, the award of the American with Disabilities Project at Greenpoint Avenue on the Crosstown Line, and Astoria Boulevard Station on the Astoria Line. Completed the interlocking modernization at Union Turnpike and 71st Avenue on the Queens Boulevard line. That concludes the Capital Program Report.
Are there any questions on the Capital Program Report? Hearing none. MTACC has no significant items to report on its projects, but Janet Lieber is available to answer any questions. Hearing none, I'd like to ask Steve Plachaki to talk briefly about procurements.
I did want to respond to, I think, Commissioner Albert's question. The R211 contract was, in fact, brought to the board in January 2018 and awarded in February 2018, and the project is moving along according to schedule. We expect to see the first pilot cars in July 2020. I might add that that is the fastest that we've ever seen cars contractually contracted for. That's 30 months from notice of award. That's Kawasaki, correct. Again, I've been asked to forego my otherwise stimulating and fan-favorite speech, other than to say, for procurements, other than to say the procurement package represents New York City Transit and MTACC procurements, includes 35 actions totaling $282.4 million in expenditures, and I request for your approval of all actions in the package.
They have been included in the committee book. May I have first a motion? Is there a second? Is there any discussion on these procurement items? Mr. Weisbrod and then Mr. Greenberg.
Yes, I have on the motion, I think it's a motion to approve these items. I object to the ratification of the Astoria over budget item on a number of grounds, and I've discussed this with Mr. Pachaki. But my major objection to it, leaving aside the futility of voting on things that have already been completed, is that this is the second ratification of an additional a cost on this ESI program. We approved one in, I don't know whether it was February or March. Why we weren't informed about that this additional work was going to be undertaken at that time or was going to be necessary, I don't know, but I am concerned about having ratifications when we should, and when information is known, and we should know in advance that this is, there's going to be additional costs, and we're not informed about it, and we're left with a fait accompli.
Mr. Plachaki, do you have a response, or Mr.
Well, I'm going to just maybe go into a little bit of the timing, because the comment is made about in March whether we knew about what we're bringing forward today. In March, we probably started to become aware. So the March item had to deal with platform panel replacement sections, and that work started. It was a retro ratification. It started in late 2017, and it concluded in May of 18. So as we started to remove those panels, we would have become aware of the possibility of additional work relative to the adjacent panel sections. That would be pipe supports for those panel sections, as well as haunch repairs, as well as then the magnitude of the girder and web repairs. But we would not have had any details with that. We would have only had the idea that, okay, there's something developing. And so we brought forward today the completed details of both of those three items in this ratification.
I just think, Mr. Chairman, that especially when a project is brought to us to ratify something that has already occurred, and there's a knowledge that there's going to be more work yet to come on this item, and that it's going to cost us more money beyond what we've already ratified as a fait accompli, that the board should be aware of what the total cost and what the expectation is likely to be. And this is, as you know, has been a particular concern of mine with respect to the Enhanced Station Initiative, where we thought we were budgeting 33 stations. Now we're budgeting 20 stations. 2 of the 5 stations that have been completed are now over budget already, even over the modest budget, the revised budget. And it seems to me that we should, particularly on items where where we're supposed to raise our hand and agree to something that's already been completed, that we should be aware that there are additional costs coming down the track, as it were, when that's known to management.
Other than your previous answer, do you have anything to add?
No, I'm going to take a look at the request, and we're going to see how best we can handle it. We do report on ESI as part of the CPOC Capital Program Oversight Committee meetings as well. The last time this project was reported on was November of 2017, and actually the independent engineer at that time made everyone aware of the concern that existed on the additional work order level for these projects. These are design-build projects. We expected to go into these projects with a higher level of additional work than typical projects for transit, and that has manifested itself. We are most certainly forthright with what additional work we handle. The timing of notification, I think, is the point that is being made, and we're going to make an effort to do that better.
Hello.
I guess I'm curious, and I share Commissioner Weisbrod's concern about ratification, which is a little bit troubling. But just procedurally, what would happen, or budgetarily, if the ratification doesn't pass? I mean, are we then saying we'll take it out of budget elsewhere? I'm not even sure how that works. And maybe we need to pose this to to the chief financial officer, but because I have concerns about it too, and I sit here and think, if it doesn't muster the votes, what even happens on a ratification?
Rather than get completely speculative about the answer, could you pick the parts that you can answer with fact?
Certainly with regard to construction, the need to turn contractors on while the contract is underway to hold schedule and also avoid impact costs is really what we focus on here. The project team, and I would say in all instances, in private industry as well, are delegated the responsibility of making sure that the project remains on schedule and therefore the power to authorize extra work. Negotiating it and getting it to a point where it's satisfactory to the board for approval is what you're seeing today. But again, I think some of these projects are reported through CPOC, and perhaps that would be a way of notifying folks about work that's ongoing. I can't speculate at this point, what would happen if projected.
You guys to think about the fact that if the model is we approve an initial budget and a project, and then from that point forward, it can incur any cost in order to keep it going even above the budgeted amount, then the board's whole role is really just to make some initial approval of a project, and the costs are just going to be what they're going to be. And I don't think that's the model we want. I think we want points of reflection where we say, do we want to scale it back? Do we want to do something else? Do we want to cut money out of something else that we're doing in real time or as close to real time as is possible with the need for the additional expenditure?
Let me be clear for myself. Are you saying that the reason for the additional expenditure is unclear?
No, I'm saying I understand the reason for the additional expenditure. It's a timing question, I think. The ratification of it versus having real-time discussions or more real-time discussions with the need for the expenditure. That the expenditure was going to be prospective, not it already happened.
Sure. I feel I ought to make comment here because ultimately I'm accountable to you for what we do. I get that retrospective approvals are not a good thing. I don't like them either. I don't like being told, well, you need to agree to this because it's already happened. It's a fait accompli. So I do understand where you're coming from. To be fair to my team, and this is an issue with the sometimes when you undertake construction, it's only when you peel something back that you find it's in far worse order than you would envisage, which is certainly the case here. And one of the dilemmas we face, I guess, as management is that particularly because on this particular subject, the ESI, the whole point was to minimize the disruption to customers to get in, get it done and get out. Had we waited in order to go through the board process and wait for the next board meeting to present it to you, to allow you to deliberate, that would, I think, it would have added time and cost and probably generated a claim on behalf of the contractor. But having said that, let us reflect upon that. Maybe there's a way that we get some sort of chairman's action in between meetings or some kind of fast-track mechanism, albeit we'd have to be mindful of the requirement to make decisions in public.
I'm sorry, Mr. Jones.
I'll be very brief, but I want to follow up on that. I think a couple of things I'd feel more comfortable with. Some kind of materiality issue. If it's a cost overrun of 1 or 2%, sure, we delegate. But when it starts to become, I shouldn't use each side access, when it starts to become huge, then the original authorization is not appropriate. So I think coming up with a mechanism where the board in an emergency session or something can have a real understanding before we commit, tens of millions of dollars would be appropriate. I am uncomfortable with this kind of work being done solely with a blank check.
Is a reasonable one. However, I think there's a general understanding, at least I have it, that once you do rehabilitation work, as anyone has ever done before, you discover things that you did not know were there. And that's why we have meetings to discuss them. But that suggestion is appropriate, and I appreciate it. Mr. Reckler, Mr. Greenberg, Mr. Weisbrod, and then Commissioner Trottenberg.
Just to maybe sum up a little, and I think this does relate a little bit to the construction cost containment plan that we talked about. If you remember, excuse me, if you remember, one of the things we discussed was not necessarily having visibility out of everything that's out there, and that there's certain risks that are going to be embedded in even design build projects, and that what we need to do better is identifying those risks to the board so that when we know what we're voting on, we know there is some exposure that is still out there, to your point, Mr. Chairman, that we may find. So I think the first thing is building into the process of identifying the risks, and I think having an allocation of a percentage beyond what we normally would be putting in as a reserve that you can move forward without disrupting the project versus coming back to the board makes sense and something that we should consider. I think the other point that was made is a little bit different, which is even if we're asking for approvals, if there's already a realization that there's going to be overruns, even without having the full amount and the clarity, I think what Carl was saying was we should know about it. Just as a matter of due course, you should say, here we now have opened this up. We've seen things. Our estimate, a range, is blank. So at least that while we're voting on something, knowing that you don't have full detail of what that exposure is, we should still have an understanding that there is exposure and some sort of sense as to the scope of that exposure.
Mr. Reckler made my point.
Yes, I don't necessarily buy completely that this was totally unexpected. These, as I understand it, these are girders at the spot where the mezzanines exist, right? Is that what we're talking about? That type of girder? The high girder, and is that the girders aren't below they have to be above because the mezzanine's there. Is that correct?
These are the platform support girders. So
the platform support girders, not for the tracks.
Yeah, so you don't see the top flange because
right, and it's the top flange that's the issue. I understand that there've been issues like this before in other parts of our system. To that, it's hard for me to say that this is totally unexpected. I mean, that's a spot where we've seen before we've had problems. Many years ago, I remember some of these girders being replaced in different parts of our system. So it's hard, and maybe I should have said something when this thing was first proposed. I don't know. I didn't see the whole scope. I'm a board member. I'm not going to get into details. But that's something that's disturbing to me, is that we have many stations that are this type of design. We've had problems in this area before. When we opened this place up, shouldn't we have suspected that this would be an issue? And maybe we did, and you didn't tell the board. I don't know, but that's one thing. The other thing is, if this is design build, and what I said is true, should the contractor have known this too and said, well, wait a minute, these things are historically a problem. There may be an issue here. And can we go to the design, can we go to that contractor and say we should make a claim against them because they should have known? Now, what that claim would be, I don't know. In the Triborough agenda, by the way, there's a claim being made against a design contractor there because of same type of situation, maybe more, the specifics are different, which is why we're making a claim there and we wouldn't make one here. That's all. You can get back to me later on that. My level of being bothered by this is a little bit higher than the other board members, because I do remember us replacing girders like this or knowing that this was a problem many years ago.
Well, a couple questions. I thought, and I remember, Andy, you gave this presentation. It was one of the first things you did when you came here, that the MTA had done an extensive analysis of all the stations. Board members were told it was too big and complicated to hand over to us, but that maybe we would get snapshots of each station. We never did. I'd still like them, to tell you the truth. And that the whole logic behind the ESI program, which I didn't agree with, it's no secret, is these were kind of quick and easy stations, and now it seems like they're not so quick and easy, and the price tag's gone up a couple of times on them. So it just, for me, further confuses the original premise of the program, and I would still like to see the snapshots of the station. And I guess, Steve, I do have to ask the question. I mean, if we don't do a retroactive ratification, what does it mean? I mean, you guys must know the answer.
I think it's raises the specter of a potential claim against the authority,
Against,
against the transit authority.
I mean, yeah, I think it's odd we find ourselves in that situation because I think you're hearing a lot of the board members feel not that comfortable with this vote.
Just a question, is it the process that we certainly can work on, or is it the actual work that was performed? Because the work that was performed was absolutely necessary because it was a structural issue that we encountered after we pulled back the concrete slabbing and as we started to do excavation, most of which could not have been done prior to. And the challenge, as I've expressed before to the board, is when you go and do I'll say a destructive evaluation, where you start to pull things apart, you have to be in a place then to immediately replace it. And most times we're not mobilized in a place that once we discover a problem, that we have a contractor mobilized. It's sort of this timing challenge that you have. We've committed to do better jobs with regard to the actual surveying of things that are available and visible to us. But in all instances, I assure you, in this particular case, what you're being asked to approve are absolutely necessary for the structural integrity of the platforms themselves and the girders.
But I think it gets to the bigger question that I still feel was never answered, which is like, what was the methodology for picking these stations? What was the benefit cost that went into picking them as the price tags? And part of it was these aren't the really complicated ones. As the price tags are going up and up, I recognize we're in the middle of the job now, but I sort of feel like as the price tags are going up and up, I think it's worth, again, discussing how did we pick these stations? What's the right amount to spend? If every single one of them, you're understandably going to rip them open and discover there's tons more work to be done, I think we should sort of revisit what we're doing here, because obviously it sort of calls into question the original analysis that went into picking these stations. I know when you rip things open, you discover stuff.
Mr. Reckler.
I was going to say, I don't think that this is an issue in terms of what you found. I think it's just process. And so with that, I think that, we should, authorize and vote on this so we don't leave it out there hanging and focus on fixing the process as we go forward.
And that is a very fine suggestion because there are two separate tracks here. Process is the one that I think most people are talking about, but frankly, the construction issues are the construction issues.
The point I was going to make was the process issue as well. Maybe we will take that away, particularly the point that a number of commissioners made about as soon as you have the first hint of trouble, let us know. We will reflect upon that and we'll come back to you with a revised process, which, by the way, I'd suggest, particularly Dr. Metzger here, it potentially has carryover to the railroads. I don't know, but it should be an MTA process. Sure. That was a good point.
Thank you. If there's nothing else, we'll be ready for a vote. Second. It's been seconded already. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. The record will reflect that, whoever's in charge of the record. The procurement package passes. Thank you. We have Mr. Cafiero. Service changes.
I'd be happy to take any questions on the M14 SBS early start, the B82 SBS, or the pilot off-peak service enhancements on several bus routes as part of Fast Forward.
Ms. Vanterpool.
Just a brief comment on the B82. While I am very excited that this project is moving forward, particularly because it remains in many cases the ire of some elected officials along the corridor, I am incredibly disappointed that this is the only one of our 17 SBS routes that does not offer weekend service. And while I certainly appreciate the feedback and the input provided by our community at large, our riders, our customers, residents, and our elected and appointed officials, it is our job to deliver the best service for our customers and to not deliver concessions based on political opposition. The case has been strongly made for quite some time about the service improvements that are needed, not just during the weekday for B82 customers, but certainly on the weekend. And again, I want to reiterate that feedback is important, but I want to be very firm that it is our job. This team has the experts on staff, in addition to community experts, right, advocates and such, who know what service is needed and should be delivered. But it is not for us to cut that back. And I'd like to know what the justification for that decision was to not provide weekend service on B82. And I ask that knowing that a very significant case was made for this entire corridor for 7-day service. So if I may have an answer, I'd appreciate that.
This particular route, the ridership on the weekend, excuse me, is significantly lower, and we would have had to literally double the level of service to maintain adequate service at the local stops as well as to add SBS. At this point, we'll see how the weekday ridership responds. There is always clearly opportunity to expand this, and the infrastructure will be in place. So we will evaluate as the route goes in. Some of the improvements in terms of bus lanes, routing, paths, et cetera, are 7-day a week, so there will be some benefits on the weekends as well.
Just to push that a little bit further, this cannot be the precedent for engagement with our elected officials in particular, that we are willing to make these sorts of concessions at the risk of our riding public and at the risk of our communities who are seeking and looking to us to deliver the service that they need and they deserve. And I hope we are never in a situation as we continue to explore SBS where we are considering these sorts of modifications. And I appreciate your point that you're going to be looking and reevaluating, et cetera. I don't even think that we should be in this position where we're reevaluating whether or not that's needed. Again, we have 17 SBS routes, and this is the only one. And it is one of the most controversial. And we need to be confident in our role as transit service providers that we know, and we are taking our customers' feedback into consideration. Obviously, there's been instances over the years where we have modified service delivery based on input, and that input is always welcome. But again, this is the first time that we are doing this sort of modified SBS, and I don't want to see this as a precedent moving forward.
Peter, maybe I should just answer that. So I agree with you, Commissioner. And I mean, for staff, it's always a bit of a balancing act, because on the one hand, our job is to advocate for our customers, and I made that point because I was at some of these meetings, and made the point that where the elected officials are rightly arguing for the people that and businesses that they represent, my job is to advocate for the customers and riders, and that's exactly what we do. But having said that, we also don't want to be completely arrogant and completely deaf to the valid points that local elected officials raise. So we do try to get that balance right, but I in no way see this as a precedent. And if we do find that the weekend ridership warrants SBS, we'll be back in front of those very same people.
Would you want to continue with your service changes report?
I'm complete. The MTA bus, though, has some. Robert?
Yes, I'm happy to take any questions on service changes related to MTA bus.
One of our public speakers today raised the issue of Beach 116th Street and Rockaway Park being the largely the terminus for a lot of the Q22, the buses that don't go onto the Roxbury area, that don't go west of 116th Street. They raised the issue that 116th Street might be problematic in having buses line up there. Is there a way to extend it slightly further west or somewhere else if the police precinct and the fire and all of the other things that are at Beach 116th Street become a problem?
Well, it will be a low volume of buses that make that turn. but we will be monitoring it and making any adjustments as necessary.
Thank you.
Report? If not, I'll ask President Byford to end with follow-up and outstanding items.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You've got the monthly Metro Card report in your books or on your desktops. It's within the pack. We're pretty much up to date with outstanding items. I've already mentioned that I'll be reporting back on the Subway Action Plan in September after the summer break. We had a question about reliability of wireless service in the subway system last month, and we're currently working with Transit Wireless, our provider, to improve the information we get about outages and report back. And then finally, we are scheduling time. The team is scheduling time with a few board members to discuss some of the legacy subway performance measures. In fact, things that came up today. So we'll make sure we close that out. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the agenda. May I have a motion to adjourn? Second, all in favor. This meeting's adjourned. Thank you.